Well, that's the first topic we are looking at this morning, ending impunity. Now, ritual killings, incessant insecurity issues, as well as that short fuel scarcity during the week because of, what name do you even call it? Adulterated, contaminated, unsafe, bad fuel from producers have been topical in the past week, and a number of other issues like that. Of course, the President Buhari has vowed that perpetrators will be brought to book. But the question is, how soon? And anyway, to get into the conversation this morning, we have with us Godi Wazirike, who is a legal practitioner. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Also with us is Professor Emmanuel Ayede, who is a professor of political institutions, governance, and public policy. He joins us all the way from Ibadan, along with Suleiman Aregwabu, who is executive director, executive secretary, HIDA Resource Center. He joins us from Surulere, locked away because of the marathon. I wish you would have been able to do the marathon yourself to the studio. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today.
Good morning.
All right. Chief, let me begin with you in the studio. The rhetoric is not new. We're going to end insecurity. We're going to put an end to ritual killings. Of course, the National Assembly will come with resolutions, which, of course, as you know, a legal practitioner, you tell us it's not a law. It's a resolution, they say, is a counsel, it's an advice. It's not really binding. So beyond the rhetoric, what exactly, do we even have an idea what we are dealing with, these issues around? Do we even have an idea of the implications of the issues we are dealing with?
Well, if you offer yourself for governance, then you must be ready to stand up to any situation that arises. But the problem is where those who are in governance actually see themselves as the alpha and omega. They can do anything and get away with it. What do I mean by that? You are driving on the road, you do one way. Nobody will stop you because you're the big man. At the airport, you jump. In governance, you say, I need this thing now, I want this money, and it is given to you. That is impunity. At the wharf, you know that this thing should not cross. It is your job to inspect and test and do all the necessary things. Somebody comes and says, leave and make it pass. That is still impunity. For such people in positions of authority who engage in impunity, they know what they're doing. And that is to subjugate you and I and make us bend to your whims and caprices. Let me explain more. You have some, after reading in the newspapers, oh, this contract has been awarded. You wait and wait and wait. Then you can investigate, find out certificate of completion has been made and given. And once it is given, what happens? He's paid. Such contracts litter the whole nation. Now, on appointments in the country, you also have this kind of impunity. The one we are used to is when you want to employ those, when you want new soldiers and so on, recruits, some states will get 10, some states will get 15. The police say the same thing is happening. Even though they're telling us that the South didn't bring in enough people, which they found ridiculous. So all these are acts of impunity by those in position of authority. A common man doesn't understand what you mean by impunity because there's no such powers to do anything other than to follow the law. So for us, the National Assembly, state legislatures passing special resolution, yes, not binding, but any serious government must pay attention, beginning with Mr. President. We know what is going on now. In the past 1 week, there has been this fear everywhere. If I buy petrol here, what happened to my engine? Somebody is in charge of testing. The sole importer of petrol in Nigeria is who? NNPC. The sole tester of every quality is what? DPR, as it then was. Now, the person that is in charge is Mr. President. All these things are under him. NNPC, former DPR, anything, he has appointed people. Those who receive money paid also from government. So everything revolves around the government. As we say in local parlance, the fish spoil for head, so everyone must follow.
All right. Well, Prof, I'm looking at the meaning of the word impunity. Just a simple Google search. And of course, the first meaning is drawn from Oxford. And impunity here means exemption from punishment or freedom from the injurious consequences of an action. You are a professor of political institutions, governance, and public policy. Are we even aware of the implications of this kind of unending activity, so to speak, Prof?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that definition clearly captures what impunity talks about. It says that people abuse power without consequences, regardless of what the rule says. And that's to say that the consequences of that abuse of power goes around the society. In other words, society suffers the consequences of abuse or misuse of power, but the individual involved in such abuse or misuse of power does not face any consequences according to law. It's a big problem, and it's what we mean by institutions are weak. When we say institutions are weak, that's exactly what we mean. And what the implication is really that those who are in government, who are supposed to take responsibility for the fate of society, are not doing so, which implies that the society itself is endangered. Because one of the reasons why we have rules and regulations is to constrain the behavior of people, to make them work towards the purposes of the state, to make them work towards the good of society.
Okay, Prof.
Now, if those rules don't...
My apologies.
Yes.
I just wanted to follow up quickly on some of the things that you've said so far. Is this phenomenon new? Is it a new phenomenon with us? And how far back does it go? Because we've been talking about in the weakness of our institutions for a very long time. So question is, how far back does this go? And I don't know, what informed it? Because if we don't know how far back it goes or where it all began, perhaps we'll have a challenge of even dealing with, dealing with cutting off or ending impunity.
Yeah, let's look at it this way. You know, when we say institutions are weak, we can put it in a spectrum, like a pendulum. It goes worse, and then it improves again, and gets better, and then depending on who is in charge, because a lot has to do, as the legal practitioners mentioned, with those who have taken responsibility for our society by occupying leadership positions. Some people trace it to the emergence of military rule, where the constitution is completely disregarded and the leader rules by decree. Therefore, at some point, the will and caprice of the leader becomes law, rather than even the decree that is issued by that leader. In fact, some people trace it to the First Republic, where politicians abuse power, where the disregard for rule led to crisis in the form of Operation Wettier in the Southwest, or the boycott of elections that led to the constitutional crisis in the First Republic, where rather than dealing with it through legal means, there was this argument about which will prevail, Is it that of the prime minister or that of the president? And some people suggested that might is right. Anyone who can control the military will determine what will happen until I think the Chief Justice of the Federation work with the other Chief Justices in the various regions to reach some form of compromise. But the bottom line is, once you have a situation where the leader openly supports disregard for procedures, disregard for rules, then you are beginning to face the kind of problem that we're talking about. And somebody will make a distinction between
Oh dear. I believe that we'll be able to get Prof back because those historical perspectives perhaps also indicate to us, okay, this is what we have on our hands now. How do we begin to address it? Well, Mr. Ribabu, the question I want to naturally pose to you would be, if we know the consequences and we know the people that are at the lower rung of the ladder, how then do we begin to address it?
Well, thank you and good morning, viewers. Really, to go back to the earlier conversation about how do we trace impunity, I think really that impunity is one of those things that the human nature gravitates towards. It's part of our nature in the Obesian states. Societies have been able to curtail this, not to entirely eradicate anywhere. People still do things, but the level of organization of society, the level of between the governed and those who govern them, determines the level of impunity you see in a society. So in societies where people are guaranteed that the law will take its due course, that no matter how much you hide, the law will get to you someday, you see the level of impunity in those. Not that impunity is not existing. So if you take, for instance, the case in the UK where the Prime Minister was being alleged to have thrown parties where people were under lockdown. I mean, these are the same crimes that we talked about. This is where you know that eventually the law will get to you, but people still do things, think that they are immune from prosecution, and that is what's happening. So when you bring it down here, the truth about impunity here is that we are all like waiting for our turn in it. And that is how you find that impunity does not just end with people who are in government. Everybody takes their opportunity wherever they find it. Everybody wants, I mean, you drive on the road and you see people, you drive on Mobolaji Bankantoni in the evening and you see downfall drivers and some private car owners will get on the other side of the road to avoid traffic and will be reversing from near Joel Ogunaike, from near Sheraton, will reverse up to Ikeja Postal. Now that tells you that this thing is with almost every one of us. However, how do society address this? It is by guarantee that when you do things, the law will get back to you. But how will that happen when you are in a society that our policing is not proper, that our judiciary does not really give justice, that our electoral system does not punish people for not performing, our economic system does not really reward the most hardworking and the most intelligent. It rewards those who have privileges, those who are smart. Even our education system, when we were younger, we were told that if you study hard, you read well, you pass your exam, you wear nice shoes. Now, that paradigm has shifted. You don't even need to go to school to drive the best of cars, to wear the best of shoes. And that's why you're now seeing that in society, people are tending towards doing whatever it is that they can. And there's this feeling that, well, it is whoever gets caught that gets caught. So for us to address impunity in Nigeria, we need to first come together as a people to realize that this path that we are on is a path to perdition. There's no nation that has gone on this trajectory and have become great.
Mr. Rigbabu, if you don't mind me butting in very quickly, some of the things that you raised, you talked about the virtue of education, for instance. Some of those things, well, the larger name will be society. But then the family units have played a role in those departments for a very long time. there is a town in Oyo State that in the center of the town, when you get to the very center of the town, what you will see there is, remember the son of whom you are. Some of those things. So when you get out of the town, you don't dare do anything different, because you know where you're coming from, and you know that somehow, just as you said, it will seem as if the hand of the community is going to come get you wherever you are if you behave out of script of what that society you came from says. So you're essentially saying that it goes back to the homes, and it dates back centuries. Where did we miss it? And how do we begin to retrace our steps?
Yeah, thank you very much. So for me, like I said, it's always been part of us is the degree that has been deteriorating. Now, when like Prof was talking about how our society evolved, the government, the First Republic and all of, during the colonial days when people did some things out of order, it's like we excuse it that they are reacting to the foreign masters. We are taking the same tradition into society. So the relationship between government and citizens is as if people who are in government are not from us. They are not among us. Unfortunately, they are. The worst amongst us end up getting into the government, because that is what society is projecting. That's what society is pushing out. So for us to start to find a retreat, that is why also, let me quickly mention, when the menace of internet fraud, who as we call it, when it started in the early part of the millennium, people were excusing it, saying, oh, it's our money that the white people stole that they are getting back. Because it has not reached us, we keep excusing things. Now it's become a problem for everyone. It's now ritual killing. They are not going after the white man anymore. They are going after my phone, your phone, my bank account, your bank account. So it's now an epidemic for us here at home. This is the way we need to see how we are part of all the problems. If we come to a stage where we see ourselves as part of the problem, then also know that there won't be a solution from the government. Because the people who get into the government, how do they even get there? What is the process that gets them there? Are they accountable to us? Will our electoral system make them accountable to us? Will our judicial system give us justice in the face of impunity? Until we come together as a society to start to redress these things, so that everybody knows that whatever you do, wherever you are, there is a consequence if you are not doing the right thing. Whether it is violating traffic, whether it is jumping queue, whether it is stealing council money, whether it is doing contracts substandard that end up. I went for a walk in Surulere this morning, and I counted over 50 manhole covers on the road that have been stolen. And all of these are death traps for vehicles, for pedestrians, for cyclists. And these things are not necessarily done by those in government, but because our system does not police very well and does not dispense justice properly, everybody is doing their own at their level. So government is doing theirs at the places where they have authority. Ordinary people like you and I are also doing ours. Those are some who are going to steal the manhole covers. So as a society, we need to come back and redress this. In that we have to ensure that no matter what you do and no matter how connected you are, if you violate the law of society, you are caught, there will be justice. And this brings us to one fundamental issue in our society that we've not paid attention to. There are so many people on death row, unfortunately, in our various prisons. And our governors and our state houses of assembly continue to enact law that says death penalty is for this offense. But the governors have all refused to sign death penalty. So anybody who is going to cut the next person's head to do money ritual, know that even if they get caught, they will be in prison and probably become a kingpin in prison. And if one day there could be a jailbreak and they will escape and they will go and start a new life somewhere. So because the system of justice is not being properly applied to be a deterrence, to discourage those who are intending to do crime, will continue to go in a vicious cycle.
Okay. Well, Chief, it would seem like we're caught between the law and society?
Well, law is meant for us, for the society, but it's also us who will implement that law. Just an example, you're a judge, you're the almighty judge. You can do anything. The id, the ego, and the superego will start fighting within themselves. In other words, you, the judge, haven't seen yourself as supreme. You can sentence an innocent man to death. That is impunity. But society checks all these things because we have what is called supervision. It is where a man or woman who is supposed to do something fails. Supervisor must step in. The tragedy is that in Nigeria today, both the man or woman who is supposed to work and the supervisor are in the same boat. They believe in impunity, nothing will happen, as we say. So when you are in charge of customs and we say petrol is being smuggled, we now blame the ordinary man. We forgot the customs officers.
But you know, you've spoken to the institutions, and you've spoken to government. You've spoken to the role of the laws that set up some of these ministries, departments, and agencies. But they are not new. The challenges we're contending with are not new, as Prof. Said the other time. Some even points as far back as pre-independence to some of these issues. It would seem then that we knew all the while what the problems were, that we just seemed to allow them to fester until now. Just you quoted the street balance, so let me also use a street balance to ask the question. Now, like this, we go the day.
No, it depends on who is in charge. Let me tell you what happened in Imo State when Colonel Adisa was brigade commander in Obinze. The governor, military governor, went on vacation, and Adisa was the acting governor. On a Monday, he was at the state secretariat by 7:30, and he shut the gates. In those days, workers resumed at 7:30. He shut the gates, and people were panicked. The next morning, he drove to Olu, and he was there by 7:30. He also closed the gate. Suddenly, a new expression arose in Imo State. Adisa is in the air. Everybody started getting to work by 7 a.m. So if you're a minister and you're in charge of a ministry, what do? Get to work early enough, and everybody will know that you are serious. It is when the junior man, let's start from the smallest, the cleaner, knows that our guy will not come until 10. He too will start sleeping. By 9:30, he will start cleaning, so our guy will see him. It is the attitude of those in government that shapes the government. Corruption can never be eliminated in any society. Quote me, any society, completely. But what makes a difference is what do you do when there is an act of corruption? When there is an act of impunity, what do you do? Do you say, well, leave him, he's from my home, or he's my friend? That is what marks the difference. America, there is more corruption in America than in Nigeria. But the moment there is that more paint of corruption on you, they will say, you must leave office. In Nigeria, if you accuse a minister of corruption, the security will come after you. In the north, they will charge you for spoiling the name of somebody, and you spend time in prison. So what determines the make of a society is what society makes of acts of impunity, of acts of corruption. When you are charged to court, do you just swagger in because you know the prosecutor, the attorney general are your people, or that you are the one who appointed the judge? There is even one that actually, I will make reference to what happened in the Supreme Court yesterday. Executive Order 10, which was there to make sure that both the legislature and the judiciary are independent. Supreme Court said that Executive Order 10 by the federal government is unconstitutional. because it has no such powers. It is to the benefit of the judiciary, all right, and legislature, but it was done wrongly because it is already there in the Constitution. And what do the governors do? The governors make sure the speaker is a houseboy. The governors make sure that they hold on to the tenterhooks of the judiciary. So anytime the chief judge needs money for anything, he goes to sit like other visitors in the governor's office. As he is sitting down, the party chairman will pass. He will not sit. He say, Chief Judge, how are you? He will just pat him on the back. Tomorrow, if there is a case involving the chairman and it comes to the chief judge, what will happen? He knows that this man has the ears of the governor.
So, Chief, in that light, it will seem then that the governors that you have pointed at now, that you've given the example of now, are operating the Constitution in breach. So, what's society supposed to do? Well, this democracy has been on for 23 years now, and counting. This same thing that you talked about now has been happening for 23 straight years, and we have done nothing.
Well, I don't think we have done nothing. We have done something, but there is also another thing holding us up. We say, go and get a voter's card, go and get a PVC, be ready to vote. We have been passing that message, but will your votes count? If those who are in charge of INEC are busy to manipulate elections, what will the common man do? Start insurrection?
I don't understand. Okay, let me pose that same question.
Hold on, let me explain something more. We do our own, which is come out and vote. But we're also fighting that those in charge of making sure that our votes count live up to expectation.
This is not about whether or not some people do their, some people they get into office to get a job done. It is about whether or not they get the job done by the rules that society has set out. One of them is what you have pointed out now. The legislature is supposed to be independent of the executive. The judiciary is supposed to be independent of the judiciary. The governors have been operating the Constitution in breach, and we are quiet. Prof, this is impunity, isn't it?
I won't think that we've been quiet. It's the level of efficacy of civil society that is at issue here. If you look around, you'll find that there have been all kinds of agitation. I mean, we talk about the NSAS agitation. We also can talk about different NGOs that have taken the government to court concerning transparency in certain situations. And there are also activists who have risen to defend the rights of individuals, including challenging the impunity by government officials. But what we can say is that probably it has not gone far enough. We need to strengthen those aspects of our governance, because after voting an individual into office, what happens in between the electoral period? So they came in 2019, and then we have to wait until 2023 before we have a chance to remove them. So I think it's the activities in between that we are now talking about. Yes, there is law, but law has to be enforced. If you look at the first point that has been made concerning leadership, there's a very important role for leadership here. Look at the concern about Nigerians, concerning how the civil service runs, concerning the issue of corruption. We've seen measures to address those issues, but we don't see the strong political will when it comes to enforcement. Take, for instance, the civil service reform. Just a few days ago, the head of service was still talking about, concluding the reform that started with the committee report of 2011. Then you ask what kind of political will in enforcing the report of the commission that was set up to do that. Now we'll be talking about security. If you follow the trend about concern about reforming the military to reposition it to work effectively with other agencies to address some of these issues. You will find that the government has also been very slow. First, they set up a committee. The committee gives a report. Then it takes another several months before they set up another committee to review what that committee has made. And then they set up another committee to oversee the enforcement of, the recommendations, some two recommendations.
Well, Prof, these issues are not unknown. My apologies. Yeah, my apologies. These issues that you've raised are not unknown. And as you know, we have just established with Chief Wazirike here, we've done this for 23 years. We have a constitution that spells out the independence of the three arms of government. I find it comical sometimes when the legislature, members of the legislature, point to the executive as the federal government. I thought they were all supposed to be federal government together. The executive, the legislature, the judiciary is the federal government. But when members of the National Assembly refer to the executive as federal government, I begin to ask questions in my mind. So now, back to the issue that I'd like for you to really speak to, and that's the fact that the Constitution is clear what the role of the legislature is at the state level and at the federal level. What the role of the legislature is, what the role of the executive is, what the role of the judiciary is. In the federal at the federal level, it would seem like there's been a semblance of independence in the three arms, but the states, that's where the issue is, and that's where real governance that affects the people really is. We're not even speaking about the legislature that many refer to as having been derogated over the years, but at the state government level, the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, they seem to all revolve around one arm of government. How do we begin to redress that? Because unless we do that, I mean, as Chief Wazirike said earlier, it would seem like the Speaker of the House of Assembly is just a ball boy to the governor.
Well, let me start by saying that not all governors act the same way. In terms of impunity, we can put them on a scale, and we see that some governors do better than others, which brings us to the point that we have emphasized, the role of leadership. Not that was the values that drive the political process. Is it the common good? Is it the interest of making a difference in your society? And that's why we are saying these are people who are part of our communities. They are not taken from outside to occupy those offices. But how is it that they get into those offices, they are behaving in ways that hurt us, and we seem to be powerless about that? The first answer would be that, one, those who are in those positions don't appreciate the grave consequences of their action, both for now and for the future generation. Secondly, they succeed in dividing us, in such a way that we are unable to act in a concerted manner to challenge the impunity that is going on. And there are all kinds of structural issues that can explain some of those challenges. For instance, if you say a state, for instance, we say we are Nigerians, we only have indigents of a state. All other residents, especially this is very important in the cities, where collective action can be very impactful in terms of the government. You'll find a situation where indigents are angling for public positions to take their own fair share of what is available at the state level. Non-indigents who are paying taxes, who are part of the community, cannot collaborate with indigents because there's a competitive relationship already between them. And many of the residents in the cities are not necessarily indigents. So there's some form of sense of powerlessness that arises from that division of civil society between indigents and non-indigents. So we need to address that so that the efficacy of citizens as residents of particular states can be assured by making this division, by eliminating that division within at the state level. That is one very important thing we can do. Then the second one is that civil society organizations existing within the state should begin to focus on the activities of governance. Then thirdly, I also think that within our educational system, especially at the university level, we have to confront some of these challenges even in the classroom. We have to confront them, because again, the consequences of the impunity is beginning to confront us in their very gory details. And I think it's time for us to begin to act. because we cannot tell who's going to be the next victim. And when we get to that point, and I think that's where we are, because somebody will say the worse the better, we'll all be provoked into taking action. And I think that's also one of the means through which some of these issues can be addressed. So as the issues become worse and terrible, we'll now be forced to act in our own interest. And I think we are getting to that position where mobilization can become stronger in challenging this impunity in our society.
Speak to how we can strengthen the institutions so we do not depend on individuals. You've spoken about leadership, just as Chief Wazirike has also spoken to. But speak to how we strengthen the institutions such that irrespective of who comes into power, as we had it before, the institutions can sustain the system sustainably, and not just because, okay, this is what the leader wants, and this is the, as we say now, body language of the leader, and consequently this is what we have to do.
Yeah, at the beginning of new policies, they say leadership mold the institution. Afterwards, institution will mold leadership. We are still in a situation where leadership is very important for the molding of institutions. Because when we say institutions are strong, we are saying the rules of the game, the rules are obeyed. And those who will demonstrate how important the rules are those in leadership position, the way they react to it. If, for instance, those who are at the leadership level agree, because that's very important. We also talk about elite consensus when we talk about institutions. So those who can make a difference, if they agree that regardless of which one of us break the rules, we are going to deal with the person, then we'll say we're starting from some point. But if within the leadership, we think that we are just there to help one another out of the disobedience or the consequence of disobeying the rules, then we are not going to make a headway. So leadership is very important. Then at the group level, the elites matter a great deal because they are custodians of society, they are custodians of the rules. If they don't put a lot of premium on enforcement of the rules, as far as it pertains to them as members of the elite, then we are not likely to. And that's why we say that the elite is responsible for the type of society that they have. Now, if they are able to agree on that basic minimum, that those who flout the rules will be punished among the elites, then it's easy to translate that into ordinary citizens. And once the first or two or three elites are punished, others will take cue. And I think that's what is missing. And we are responsible for what is going on to that extent.
Well, Mr. Arigbabu, this is where we are now. We have a few minutes to wrap up this conversation. So where do you suggest that we begin to focus our attention? And gentlemen, you all may need to speak to this in the light of the general elections that is ahead. So we need to begin to speak to the leadership recruitment process. Let me begin with you, Mr. Arigbabu, on this score. What are the questions Nigerians need to ask? What are the issues to interrogate? What are the questions, the issues Nigerians need to interrogate in selecting the next crop of leaders?
Thank you very much. Quickly before I address that, let me just say that the quagmire that we find ourselves, is either there is a big bang, something shocking that gets us out of it, or there will be bits and pieces of actions here and there that will help us to start taking ourselves out of it. I'll give you an example. In terms of leadership recruitment process, for instance, the newly elected governor of Anambra State, Professor Charles Soludo, has said that, okay, if you are going to be in my government, you have to go through the public process, public scrutiny, you have to apply. That is something. Governor Nasir El-Rufai in Kaduna State said before you can be a local council chairperson, you have to write an exam. I was talking to a professor of law recently, former vice chancellor, a prince, and I was asking, in your community where you are a prince, where you are even likely to be the next king, if you want to be a councillor, can you, by your own whims and caprices and the will of the people, get to that position without the sanction of somebody somewhere? And the truth is that he can't. So the leadership recruitment process in Nigeria we need to change our electoral system. Not only for those who are coming in through the electoral system, but also those who are going to be compensated with appointment. This administration, Nigeria had a lot of hope in 2015 that with President Buhari and his antecedents, a lot of things will be done about impunity and corruption. But certain appointments were made in certain critical offices to the administration of justice system that has made a mess of that. And what you have now is people using the resources of state to prosecute citizens fighting for Nigeria in protecting corrupt former and present officials of government who have stolen the country blind. So as we approach 2023, we need to first scrutinize our electoral system. Is it likely to deliver the will of the people at the ballot? One, what kind of individuals should come into power? And Nigeria focus too much on the president. Our governors are emperors. They have too much powers and exercise it wrongfully. So what kind of people do we need in various state houses in Nigeria? What kind of president do we need? We should not allow ourselves to be trapped into that terrible conversation of is it integrity that matters or competence? Why should we have one and not have the other? We should have both. So nobody should come and tell us, oh, you have seen that integrity is not enough. Now, integrity is important. We cannot do away with it. Equally, competence is important. At least Nigerians have tested both ends of the stick. And we know that in going forward, the kind of people we should be asking for at the state houses, at the state level, at the presidency level, at the national assemblies and state houses of assembly, should be people who are not coming with baggages, should be people who have a measured level of competence, and people whose integrity are not called to question. Okay. We have so many. We once had an AIG of police in the National Assembly, the Senate, who said that most of his colleagues were people standing having one offenses or the other with the police, who were then at the Senate. Now, these are the people who then make the law that will ensure that the elite hijack of power, the political class, their hijack of state, will not be relinquished because they will use. So take, for instance, the pronouncement by the Supreme Court. It is true, yes, okay, perhaps the president do not have that power to do executive order 10. But look at the implication of that executive order for us. It's important for this country. Now, you will expect that the next thing naturally will be for the president to go back to the National Assembly and say, please amend the law so that this can. But the National Assembly will not.
I guess we'll have to wait to see if and when that will happen. Well, Chief, you started the conversation around the leadership recruitment process. So, in the build-up to the election is going to happen about a year from now. So, what kind of questions should Nigerians be asking of the leaders, of the people they want to employ? Because we should emphasize that it's an employment. It's not just an election. It's an employment. So in asking people to come take a job of governor, of member of the National Assembly, of member of the State House of Assembly, of president, what are the questions Nigerians should be asking those people who want that job or those jobs?
You know, what you just raised now is very fundamental. But there's also an aspect of these questions, which I know the president and those around him also felt recently, just a small one. Those who conduct elections are supposed to be above board. But one of those screened, one of the people who have just been screened, a professor from Bayelsa, is a card-carrying member of APC. She has passed through the National Assembly. She's waiting for swearing in by Mr. President. And what will that person decide in a contest between PDP and APC? Naturally, APC. But straight to your question, those who are coming to represent us, those who are coming to rule us, come 2023, cannot be people who have just dropped from the sky. Any helicopter politician, please chop his money and throw him out. So we are looking for people in the society where you come from. Who are you? What have you done? Yes, you don't have money. You don't need money to help a poor woman, a poor widow. You don't need too much money. It could be just lifting a hand. So we have to evaluate the quality of each person, the tendency of that person to do good and to align with the people. I don't mean those who, if you want to kill people, they come and join you to kill people. No. Like in Lagos, there are some people who get up and say, this person must go, that person must go. Not because that person has done something wrong, but because of where the person comes from. We don't need such rabble-rousers. We need people who have depth. It's a man who has depth who will say, this road is my constituency project. It's going to cost 20 million. Put it there. When it is awarded to the contractor, he, the legislator, will be visiting to see the stage of work. As he's moving around, the people will also see him. That road, good people pass, bad people pass, himself will take credit. We need such people. For governance, we need people who have what I can call can-do spirit. You have that tendency towards, this thing is a table, let's move it. But you also have people who say, well, let us discuss whether it is this and this and that. By the time they finish discussing, 1 year is gone. And that is what we see today. Most governors are taken by surprise by the third year. So for 2023, let's not keep making the same mistake we make.
Okay.
The legislators are not our masters. The governors, the president, they're all our servants. It is a social contract between us and them. Okay. That if you do this for us for 4 years, we have a chance to even return you. But then, if within that 4 years they're not doing well, the civil society groups should take the first turn. If you remember, up to 2015, they were active. As soon as Buhari came, what happened? Most of them went to sleep, except Serap. Serap is the only one using all the instruments of power given to the people to see that things are done. Okay. But then, small correction. Executive Order 10, they didn't introduce anything new, except saying, do what you're supposed to do. Under the Constitution, legislature is independent. Judiciary is independent. But what happens is the governor receives the money for the three, for the executive, for the legislature, and for the judiciary, and keeps them.
Well, I think we should even begin to talk about whether they should have a joint account where they all sign. We don't answer that one yet. Well, Prof, it's time to go. But I give you 30 to 40 seconds to speak to the elites that you've spoken about. Many say the elites don't come out to vote. What would be your counsel to them going forward?
Yeah, I think they have more fundamental role to play in addition to voting. If you look around, they form different groups showing concern about the tragedy of the Nigerian situation, especially when it's coming close to election. There's a recent meeting in Lagos which made the media around. And we expect that those kind of concerns should translate into concrete action because they have the capacity to influence the recruitment process. Because it's not just about the rules, it's not just about people voting. It's also that it's real politics when it comes to that. And since they have the resources, they have the education, the network and connections, we think that those among the elites who are really concerned about the tragedy of the Nigerian situation should sustain action, that will lead to improvement in the quality of people that end up in public office. And they can do that not just through the electoral process, but using their networking and their organizing ability, which they have shown in certain moments. Yes.
Professor Emmanuel Ayede, Professor of Political Institutions, Governance and Public Policy, thank you so much for your perspectives this morning, as well as Mr. Suleiman Arigbabu, Executive Secretary, Header Resource Center. Both of them join us virtually. And many thanks to you, Chief Godi Uwazurike, who is a legal practitioner, for coming to the studio to share your thoughts with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So, Sunrise continues right after now with another issue. Please stay with us.